Good morning, everyone. This is Ben Weisner, your host for today's webinar. Thank you for joining us this morning for Dyslexia and Read Naturally Q&A with Cory Stai, Read Naturally's Director of Research and Partnership Development. Cory applies 20 years of educational experience to support educators, leaders, and policymakers with literacy, continuous improvement, and standards-based education. During our presentation, please ask any questions you may have using the questions tool in your meeting panel, and we'll make an effort to get back to as many of you as possible in the coming days with email responses to questions we may not be able to address today. You should have all received links to the handouts for today's meeting. The handouts are also available from the meeting panel if you'd like to download and print them out now. I've also added an updated link in the chat if you'd like to access one of the handouts that way. Many of you have also asked about a recording of this webinar. We'll be sending out follow-up emails with links to the recording in about 24 hours, so please look for that in your inbox. Feel free to share the recording with anyone at your school or district who you think would benefit from this very valuable information. And finally, if you're having technical difficulties, please contact GoToWebinar support. Their phone number is listed at the bottom of the meeting panel. And now, without further delay, I'm going to pass the microphone off to Cory Stai, your presenter for today's Read Naturally webinar.
Thank you, Ben, and welcome all. It's great to be with you all today to share resources and answer questions about reading intervention for individuals at risk or diagnosed with dyslexia. Literally hundreds of questions were submitted to me from the over 1,500 registrants who signed up with a passion for this session to learn more about dyslexia and the ability to use Read Naturally's programs to meet their needs. Those questions cover a wide array of topics. This word cloud captures the diversity of those topics, and they range everywhere from the nature of dyslexia to questions about specific Read Naturally programs, about effective strategies for distance learning, and the unique needs of specific student groups, such as English learners or older students. Over the course of just 45 minutes, of course, it's not possible to cover all of these topics, but I'm going to try today to strike a balance between providing resources to you for further learning, and that may provide answers to questions we won't have time to address today, and also providing answers to some specific questions as we go. This webinar is the third professional resource put out by Read Naturally this school year on dyslexia. We published a white paper on dyslexia in September, which was followed up during Dyslexia Awareness Month with a webinar presentation by educational researcher and consultant Dr. Jan Hasbrouck. And now you are here with me in this second webinar to continue that conversation. But to avoid replication with the information and resources already available, and to reserve as much space as possible today for covering new information, I've made a specific effort to not cover topics that have been previously addressed. However, I want to make sure right up front that those of you who posed questions on those topics can access those answers to those questions and get them answered utilizing these resources and others. So up front, I'm going to direct you to several resources that will provide a much deeper treatment of these topics than would have been possible in this Q&A format, so that you have those at your fingertips and disposal as we progress today and move forward from here. First, let's look at the white paper. This 42-page paper is presented in 4 parts and builds educators' knowledge of dyslexia and the needs of students at risk for or identified with the syndrome. For those of you seeking a summary of the latest findings and up-to-date knowledge and research, this is the resource that provides that comprehensive summary of the state of our understanding of dyslexia as we know it today in 2020. Part 1 covers what dyslexia is and isn't, its causes, defining characteristics, its prevalence, and myths and understandings. The second section summarizes what we know about how typically functioning brains learn to read from the reading science, while part 3 explores how dyslexia disrupts and impairs the brain's reading network. Today's session largely focuses on the fourth section of the paper, which explores the benefits and uses of Read Naturally programs for teaching dyslexic learners. Of the two, this paper and the webinar we're about to talk about, this is a pretty academic presentation of current knowledge with extensive notes and references for those that are really have an interest in exploring the science of reading and to get an updated summary of where the science is at. This will be the resource reference that will provide that for you. Available in our webinar archives is our conversation with Dr. Jan Hasbrouck. During this 80-minute webinar, Jan presented a fantastic overview of dyslexia. In her opening 45-minute presentation, she discussed the nature of dyslexia, how dyslexia can be identified and diagnosed, and what we know about the instructional needs of students with dyslexia. Jan and I then had a follow-up conversation to go more deeply into the topics that were covered. The handouts, as well as the recording of that webinar, are available on our website, and I'll show you a link to that here in a moment. In addition, Jan's recently published book, Conquering Dyslexia, whose cover you will see there on the right-hand side, is another great resource for further learning. Both her presentation and the book provides a very clear, easy to follow summary that I'd highly recommend for those looking to learn more at sort of that basic summary level. Taken together, the white paper and the previous webinar address a host of questions many of you posed today. And so for that reason, I'll not be spending time on those topics, but instead I want to name some of those that are covered so that you know to go to these places and that you can find answers to these things that won't come up. So those include a deep dive of the characteristics and prevalence of dyslexia and how we know, diagnosis of the disability, current findings from reading science, the simple view of reading. We'll summarize that briefly today, but not really unpack it as fully as these resources do, as well as what research has to say about the efficacy of accommodations, such as covered overlays or special fonts, and they address issues of reversals and vision and other topics like that as well. So those are addressed in the paper and the previous webinar, and I invite you to utilize those for answers to the questions you may have posed on those particular topics. Another topic that I received lots of questions about from those that registered for our webinar today was around utilizing Read Naturally programs through distance learning models, as so many of us still in the 2020-21 school year are in hybrid models, distance models, and unfortunately transitioning into them more and more by the day. I want to make you aware of some excellent resources available from my colleagues. First, the knowledge base of our website contains an overview summarized here on this slide that provides comprehensive resources to support learning and implementation of Read Naturally programs through a distance learning model. I'm going to show you where to access that page in a minute when we head to the website. Additionally, there are 2 webinars whose recordings and resources are available that provide tips and training for remote learning. First, shown on the left side of this slide, using Read Live in a distance learning model is a 1-hour webinar. In it, Ben, who kicked us off today, introduces you to strategies and features for conducting the program through distance learning. Our development team has been working hard throughout the year to add features to enhance the ease and success with which teachers, parents, and students can use the program. And the second webinar, Read Live Distance Learning Features, presents a host of new features added just within the last month to Read Live, and that was recorded just a couple of weeks ago. Features include a waiting list page where teachers can see students who are ready for a cold timing or pass activity step. A login as student function to make it easier for teachers to move back and forth to log in as students to conduct those in remote settings. A new student recording feature we're very excited about that allows students to record their recording for teachers to review and provide feedback on asynchronously, and several other new features that we're excited to provide in our latest update of Read Live. So check out this 45-minute webinar to learn how and why you might use those features as part of your distance learning efforts. So I'm going to pause just for a moment in our presentation for us to take a quick tour of these and a couple of other useful resources that are on our website that I want to make you aware of, both so that you are sure to be able to find these, as well as are aware of a couple of other items here. So I am, if you will give me just one moment to transition to here. So this is our web page. The items I'm going to highlight today are found under the research menu in our top navigation. Challenges we address takes a look at a variety of specific challenges and student needs and system needs that our programs address. So as I click into that page, you'll see the first one here is dyslexia. We also have resources to discuss use of programs to meet the needs of multilingual learners, to provide differentiated instruction, distance learning, MTSS models, state standards, homeschool curriculum. And so there's a variety of issues addressed here. And so I'm going to click into the dyslexia page and show you some of the resources available here. In the main text, as I scroll down, this is a bit of a Cliff Notes version of some of the high-level content from the dyslexia white paper. And so for a high-level access to additional resources, links to learn more, and a brief overview, you can take a look at the content there on that page. As I scroll back up to the top, in the right-hand navigation, we see here a summary of the 4 parts of the dyslexia white paper and a link to download that paper right here from the dyslexia website. Finally, as I scroll down here to additional resources available from the page, you will see the link here under webinar video to Dr. Hasbrouck's Conquering Dyslexia webinar I was referring to earlier. And then underneath that, there are a handful of blog articles that have been posted to our blog, RN Bookmark, over the years, including 2 that I wrote and published just this school year as part of our efforts to support building understanding around dyslexia. That includes the birth of dyslexia, which takes a look at the fascinating origin story of our discovery of dyslexia in 19th century medicine, as well as a post that's gone out that explores dyslexia's disproportionate impact on learning opaque languages like orthographic languages like English. There are other blogs that will be posted throughout the year, so I encourage you to check back here or to check our newsletters if you're part of that, or the blog, which is available under our About section of the website. All right, one last stop. I'm just going to move back to the challenges we address and show you the distance learning section here. The initial web page I referenced is this page, the overview. And so you'll see here each of those topics provided a brief summary and its own page with additional information, resources, and in some cases, trainings, webinars, or videos to help you with those particular functions and features. Finally, under the research menu, once again, I want to point out one last reference item that I think will be relevant to our topic today. Alignment with best practices. This particular page, as I click into that, has a variety of specific reference items to show the alignment of our programs to various criteria, checklists, and needs that are out there. I want to just highlight the top one here, which is the most recent one posted. Just a couple of years ago, there was an update by the Institute of Education Sciences to the practice guide recommendations for teaching foundational reading skills in grades K-3. And so as I click on Learn More, this page presents those recommendations. You see the cover of the report there at the right. The report is the product of a panel made up of both educational researchers as well as practicing educators, tasked with going through the current research to determine what evidence shows are effective practices. So in the bullet points right in here, we see those evidence-based practices along with the ESSA evidence levels currently supporting those practices behind them. And then as I scroll down, each of the 4 recommendations made by the panel also has 3 to 6 or 7 specific actions that are the instructional practices that need to be implemented in order to achieve implementing those recommendations as evidence has shown is effective for student outcomes. So I want to just highlight that the right-hand column here talks about how our Read Live programs, that includes Read Naturally Live, both its sequenced and phonics series, as well as our newly published Word Warm-Ups Live component of the Read Live platform, addresses these particular issues. And so as you take a look through here, it says explicitly what features and strategies within our programs attend to these things and achieve these particular goals. If on a couple of occasions there may be partial accomplishment of that that you may need to supplement behind in order to fully implement those recommendations, that's there as well. So with that, that will conclude our mini tour, and we will head back to our presentation. And get us back up and running. All right, hopefully that's got us back where we needed to be. All right, this is a question that nobody asked in the hundreds of questions, but as I was reviewing questions, it became evident that there might need to be a second of clarification here on this one. What is Read Naturally? As I read through questions, I discovered that some of you referred to using Read Naturally, and you were talking about our web-based Read Live programs. Others of you referred to using Read Naturally, and the question suggested that you were using and requesting information about our 1-minute reader programs, while still yet others are referring to using Read Naturally and what it does and doesn't do, and are using our print with audio support programs, Encore with audio CDs, or in some cases, perhaps still our old audio cassettes that are alive and well out in the world working with kids. So I want to take just a moment to make everyone aware of the full scope of programs that are available before we discuss them in reference to dyslexia. I'm going to refer to quite a few of them as we move through our discussion for the remainder of our time today. So Read Naturally, which is the name of the company, offers 8 different reading interventions. Together, these programs provide reading intervention in phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, and spelling. We'll discuss several of these as we consider the needs of dyslexic learners. And when in general conversation or in conversation with us or other educators, leaders, or parents, it's important to understand which Read Naturally program is being discussed, because what Read Naturally does or what Read Naturally doesn't do is really dependent upon which program you're discussing, because there is not one single program provided known as Read Naturally. So with that clarification, we will take a look at these and what they offer for your students with or at risk of dyslexia as we move forward. So I think the first question that I need to respond to while the white paper as well as the webinar go into a deep dive on these contents. We'll start with some shared knowledge of what dyslexia is as a definition before we jump into our questions. Dyslexia is a specific learning disability that impairs the areas of the brain and the connections among them used for reading, oftentimes referred to as the brain's reading network. Developmental dyslexia is biological in nature. That is, it's something you're born with. It's shown to have genetic and heritable traits. Dyslexia affects between 5 and 17% of the population. As a spectrum disorder, it affects individuals differently along a continuum from quite mild to very severe in its impact on a person's ability to acquire reading proficiency. The most common characteristic of dyslexia is a deficit in phonological processing. That is, its basis is in the processing of the sounds of language, not in vision as we once previously thought. While dyslexia is not something a person grows out of, evidence has shown, and this is our silver lining, that given appropriate and adequate instruction and intervention, most individuals with dyslexia can achieve close to normal or normalized reading proficiency. So let's jump into some Q&A here. The most commonly asked question in various forums was a very practical one, which is, what do individuals with dyslexia need? To explore this question, I'm going to quickly reference 3 commonly used frameworks for discussing the components of reading acquisition. The simple view of reading, Scarborough's reading rope, and structured literacy. These are 3 different presentations of very similar ideas, some of which or all of which you might be familiar with. First, the simple view of reading has become more and more commonly referenced as a summary of early reading acquisition. It is stated as an equation that says that reading comprehension is the product of a reader's ability to decode words and to comprehend the meaning of the words being read. So, simply put, it says that if a student can quickly and effortlessly read the words in a given passage, and that student can understand that same passage when it's read to her, then it follows that student should be able to comprehend that passage when she reads it herself. Learners with dyslexia, as we mentioned, suffer impairment in the phonological system. That deficit in the sound component of language hinders acquisition of the code and development of effective decoding and word recognition. For this reason, learners with dyslexia generally need additional supports to learn the basic skills necessary for proficient word reading, identified in the simple view under the coding side of this equation. The same idea looked at in another way is Scarborough's reading rope. This visual, which I'm sure many of you have seen over the last 20 years, beautifully shows how skilled reading results from the integration and efficiency of many components of the reading process. This version of the rope embeds the simple view of reading. We can see that language comprehension, an alternative label for the listening comprehension, labels the components in red along the left-hand side of the rope. And word recognition, an alternate label for decoding, is labeling the components in blue. It is these blue strands, phonological awareness, decoding as taught through phonics, and sight recognition as acquired through orthographic mapping, that dyslexic readers need our help to acquire. And so that's going to be the focus of several of our questions as we unpack what does that look like and how do we use various programs to support students in those areas. Finally, another way of representing these concepts that's widely used out in the field is a framework known as structured literacy. Structured literacy, previously known as Orton-Gillingham-based instruction, describes both what students should be learning and how instruction should be delivered. This slide labels the what defined by structured literacy. Notice that the similarity to the simple view and the reading rope here in that phonology, sound symbol association, and syllable instruction fall under that word recognition or decoding part of the simple view. Syntax and semantics fall under the language or listening comprehension side, while morphology plays an interesting role, standing kind of with one foot in each component. And so elements and practices named in these frameworks describe the early literacy skills that every child should receive instruction to develop. And while all students need high quality instruction in these areas, we're going to focus on the word recognition components for which learners with dyslexia, at risk of reading disability, most commonly need supports and interventions. Dr. David Kilpatrick, in his excellent book, Essentials of Assessing, Preventing, and Overcoming Reading Difficulties, which is a great summary of reading science if you're looking for a more detailed read at some point, identifies three key elements common to highly successful reading interventions. Research has found that they must eliminate the phonological awareness deficits and teach phonemic awareness to an advanced level. They teach and reinforce phonic skills and phonic decoding, and they provide opportunities for reading connected text. And these particular items mirror the recommendations of the reading foundations in K3, and these things are true for older students as well in terms of their reading acquisition and the needs of an effective reading intervention program. Before we explore how to meet those needs and build those skills and that understanding in students, however, there's one more important aspect of structured literacy that we should unpack. We've looked at what it says must be taught in terms of content, but this slide shows three important ways research has found that it should be taught: using diagnostic teaching to identify students' needs, and then delivering systematic, cumulative, and explicit instruction. So let's look at ways to do each of these using Read Naturally programs. In terms of diagnostic teaching, in our last dyslexia webinar, Dr. Hasbrouck generously shared this diagnostic checklist. It's one of the handouts available with the webinar materials. It's taken from her book, Conquering Dyslexia. Diagnostic teaching requires that educational systems have means to identify students' needs in each of these areas. And each of these areas on this checklist represent an indicator of risk for dyslexia. As a complex syndrome, there's no such thing as a normal abnormality. It is abnormal development of the brain during pregnancy and early infancy that is largely genetic in nature. It's not nurture. It's not something that is the fault of a parent or anything that can be avoided at this point in our understanding. But it is affecting the reading network. And because it affects everyone differently, there's no perfect science for determining who is dyslexic and who isn't. And there doesn't really need to be. If we're looking at these specific criteria and indicators and attending to the needs that students present in these areas, we are applying the treatment and remedies that somebody would get regardless of whether they have a diagnosis or not. Now, I don't want to minimize a diagnosis, which provides language and opens up oftentimes access to additional resources and understanding for parents, for families, and for some educators as well. It is a jumping off point for application of additional community, family, and school resources. But this checklist, a great summary of the areas in which we want to make sure we are monitoring from a very early age to try and catch issues as quickly as we can in order to institute those supports in our multi-tiered systems of support for students as quickly as we can. So when a need is identified, the proper reading intervention can be selected and implemented for that student. This chart shows the three key elements addressed by Dr. Kilpatrick in his list of effective elements of good intervention. and shows how each of our Read Naturally programs attend to these three areas of the decoding or word recognition side of the simple view of reading that students at risk or with dyslexia are likely to need support and struggle with in the acquisition of those decoding and word recognition skills. And so in the chart, you will see in blue that identifies an area that is a program focus. It is something that is the program is very explicitly designed to cover in a comprehensive way. And in light blue, there are some areas in which there may be incidental benefit or, for example, in the area of phonemic awareness, may not be comprehensive in covering all the components of phonological and phonemic awareness, but may cover some of those, most often sound isolation, blending, and segmenting without some of the manipulation that would be required to be a comprehensive support as you find in the phonemics program. So with this context of diagnostic teaching leading to the delivery of explicit, systematic, and cumulative instruction, let's explore each of these three content buckets of phonemic awareness, phonics decoding, and fluency or reading of connected text to develop automaticity. So I'm going to bring in at each step here questions that were submitted by you that are somewhat representative of questions on this topic, of which there may have been many more. And so my thanks again for the questions that you've submitted prior to our conversation today, as well as any that you may be offering up as we progress. So what are some ways to incorporate phonological awareness activities with the Read Naturally program? And this is another case where I think the Read Naturally program probably refers to Read Naturally Encore in print or Read Naturally Live in our web-based program. There are several of our programs that provide phonological awareness, support, practice, and explicit instruction. The one that provides it comprehensively and teaches all 6 types of phonemic awareness, or PA as it's abbreviated here, is the phonemics program. Phonemics does one thing and it does it well, and that is to provide phonemic awareness, instruction and practice for students to build that awareness and those skills. It teaches all 6 types of phonemic awareness skills: isolation, blending, segmentation, addition, deletion, and manipulation in a cumulative process with lots of explicit modeling and support. I point out that it's sound-based because phonemic awareness instruction can be done with sound only as an auditory exercise, or it can be done in combination with print in teaching letter sound correspondence. There's some research that suggests the with print may have slight benefit, but there's pros and cons to each, and both have been found to be very effective at building phonemic awareness for students that need it. On the right-hand side are 3 other programs that do build levels of phonemic awareness, especially around the isolation, blending, and segmentation that is evident in Gates' case in some explicit phonemic awareness components to lessons, and in all cases part of the teaching of letter sound correspondence through phonics instruction and the ongoing practice in blending words, in applying those phonics elements in the exercises and practice and authentic practice in passages in those programs. So several opportunities there to add on a phonemic awareness component if your core programs or your supplemental intervention programs don't have that available for students that need it. And as we think about this population of 5 to 17% that likely have some level of dyslexia and impairment in the reading network, those on the severe side of that impact are likely to need additional supports that go beyond what may be typical in core instruction. So again, important to assess their phonemic awareness for those that are really struggling and at risk or behind grade level peers, and to provide instruction when it's needed. So moving into phonics, I loved this this quote. It's so representative of things I myself have heard over the years. I get pushback from reading specialists that Read Naturally does not provide explicit phonics instruction, but I see it work. A representative question asked in multiple ways was, how phonetically based is Read Naturally? And I think it's important for us to take a moment to talk through that and address that for a moment. In the appendices of the dyslexia white paper in Appendix B, you will find 4 documents. These are program scope and sequence summaries for 5 of our most commonly used Read Naturally programs. I'm going to go left to right. I know you can't read this, but I just want to point them out and make you aware that they're there for you to review and access and utilize both instructionally and in conversation with about the ways in which phonics are incorporated and explicitly taught within programs. So on the far left, in fact, this is the phonemics scope and sequence chart, and these of course are not phonics skills, but the phonemic awareness skills that we just talked about. Next is the GATE, reading intervention for small groups, scope and sequence summaries, which includes a scope and sequence of skills, as well as the featured sounds of the GATE lessons throughout each of the 3 levels of the program that are available. Word warm-ups, phonics elements by level, looks and presents for each of the 3 levels of the word warm-ups program, available in both print and now as part of Read Live, the specific scope and sequence of phonics skills as they are taught and reinforced through the program. And then finally, Read Naturally Live, encore phonics elements by level, presents the scope and sequence of phonics through the phonics levels as taught through the phonics series of those programs. So all of our programs are phonics based, and they all provide explicit systematic cumulative instruction. Having said that, it is possible in these programs to be utilizing the program and implementing the program and to not be utilizing the phonics-based instruction that's available or embedded within the program. In particular, for Read Live or Reading Naturally Encore 2, if you're not utilizing or haven't purchased the phonics series, that's one opportunity in which the phonics available within the program might not be being utilized for students that need that kind of support and lead to the belief that it's not there, when in fact it most definitely is. The whole point of our phonics series within those programs is to provide that instruction for students who need it. So I want to walk through just 4 opportunities for providing phonics instruction utilizing our programs in different ways. So the first opportunity would be that phonics series available within Read Naturally Live and Read Naturally Encore. A second opportunity would be to pair Read Naturally Live with Word Warm-Ups Live, or pair the print version of Encore with the print version of Word Warm-Ups, or some combination, especially for students whose earliest phonics need does not line up terribly well with their current phonics level and phonics need. We found students progress fastest and most efficiently through both their fluency and their phonics when they can be working at the just right level in each of those areas. And so to accommodate that, students can be placed when they don't line up well, as identified through placement and phonics assessment, into the sequence series, and then have an add-on of the additional activities of the Word Warm-Ups program as a phonics component on top of that. A third approach you could take is to utilize our GATE program, which is our reading intervention for small groups, a very traditional small group instruction with explicit lessons, with teacher guides, along with flipbook materials and student workbooks for small group adult guided instruction. For those opportunities, whether within special education, within classroom intervention within the classroom, or other places. It can be used in a one-on-one purpose as well within Tier 3 instruction, so it works well for small groups or individualized intervention. A fourth opportunity would be to supplement core instruction or supplemental interventions with word warm-ups or Signs for Sounds. Signs for Sounds is a program that teaches spelling and phonics skills concurrently. And so that, along with word warm-ups, is a really nice addition to supplement other programs as needed for students if you're looking for those opportunities. Finally, then, of the three large components here identified by Kilpatrick and is reflected in each of the articulations in the Simple View of Reading's decoding section, in Scarborough's rope, and in structured literacy, is fluency. And I really like this initial guiding question here. Is fluency an appropriate intervention for students with dyslexia? The short and emphatic answer starts with a yes. Students with dyslexia and all students in developing skills and progressing towards proficient reading need opportunities, ample opportunities to practice with feedback the decoding that they are learning in decoding words, and doing so in connected authentic text, as Kilpatrick pointed out. And it is not, however, necessarily sufficient for students, as we've discussed in doing diagnostic teaching. If students have phonics needs or have phonemic awareness needs, even more foundationally, fluency intervention without the additional interventions for phonics and phonemic awareness is not going to be sufficient, likely, to build those skills. And it's highly unlikely to be proficient for students with a learning disability in reading with dyslexia, for whom their brain and their network is working against them and making it more difficult to acquire these items. One quick example from research, the research theory articulated by a concept known as orthographic mapping, presented by Linnea Airy, has found through research that for neurotypical readers, that students can develop a word as a sight word in as few as 2, 3, 4 encounters with that particular word. Research has also shown that for many students with dyslexia or learning disabilities in reading, that it may take many more opportunities and encounters with that word in order to map that word onto their lexicons. And so for that reason, the repetition built in a host of ways into our programs is really helpful, especially once that foundation of strong phonics has been built, or while that support is being provided as students are also working at their just right level on developing automaticity, fluency, prosody, and authentic text, and doing so within a context of an emphasis on comprehension. All right, last item that I really wanted to address that came up quite a bit within the hundreds of comments that I'm appreciative that you sent in today is this question of what specific characteristics of the Read Naturally program help students with dyslexia. I'm going to run down a list here. All of these items are discussed with a little bit more detail in the context within the white paper part 4. So don't feel a need to frantically write these down. I encourage you to access part 4 of the paper, as well as the parts before it that provide a lot of background knowledge and context for why these features are helpful to students that may have dyslexia. So all programs, as we've said, are phonics-based and provide explicit, systematic, and cumulative phonics instruction if you access those parts of the program. Many programs reinforce early phonemic awareness skills, and Read Naturally has a comprehensive phonemic intervention available in phonemics to supplement instruction for those who need it. While many programs provide semi-independent student learning and support, all Read Naturally programs keep the teacher front and center as the expert in the room, relying on that art of teaching to provide differentiated supports, to monitor the motivation and attend to the potential frustrations of students within the program, to ensure that they are supported sufficiently and at the just right level to be able to make progress with sufficient rigor without the negative impacts of working at a frustration level. Programs provide ongoing formative feedback and progress monitoring capabilities to ensure students are progressing at an appropriate trajectory. Placement processes and guidance help adults ensure that students are working at their optimal level. And then finally, extensive audio supports are built into Read Naturally Live and Encore, which provide, and word warm-ups and several others, which provide additional benefits for dyslexic learners. In particular, this includes audio-supported keywords, story narration, clickable story words in Read Live. Audio supports teach pronunciation of unknown words and activate prior knowledge in students' oral vocabulary. The read-along steps provide simultaneous multimodal exposure to both pronunciations and visual word forms, and programs provide significant repetition of words to foster development of automaticity and acquisition of sight words through the process of orthographic mapping. The white paper provides a lot of background understanding on those items that I rattled off and some of those technical terms there for those that might want to learn more and read more about that, about how the brain's reading network functions as we understand it today by the science of reading, as well as additional features that are beneficial to at-risk and dyslexic learners that I did not highlight there. So at this point, Ben has graciously been monitoring the chat and looking to see what questions are out there. And so I'm going to ask Ben if there are specific questions or clarifications as we approach the end of our time here that maybe we should address before we wrap up today.
Yeah, Cory, I would say one question that would be worth addressing before we wrap up, as we are pretty close to our time, but if you could just say a few words about how intervention looks like for older students who are struggling with dyslexia.
Yeah, absolutely. So my teaching background actually was primarily at the secondary level. And so to all of my middle level and high school educators that are joining us today, I appreciate the challenges that exist in working with students who have gotten to that point and still are struggling, perhaps because they had undiagnosed disability, perhaps the system had not caught and provided appropriate remediation, and perhaps they have a learning disability that is just making the acquisition of these skills just require this intensive work and take this much support. So generally speaking, older students do not need different things than younger students. I would point out that Read Naturally's founders and developers, Candy Einot and the various curriculum staff that have worked on our programs, have very intentionally published our programs in a way that don't look babyish or young. Our programs can be used and are used quite successfully with students everywhere from about middle of grade 1 up through adult education. They are used in correctional facilities as part of adult basic education because these are the skills as we looked at the articulation of the components of reading that are required. For older students, it becomes more and more likely that you will be utilizing the story options and the differentiation that is available within our program in terms of adjusting the number of read-alongs that are required. Many older students have well-developed oral vocabularies. Some of them maybe working in the program because while their fluency is something they're working on, the comprehension aspect of this and components and practice with nonfiction text is something that's beneficial to them. And it's critical in the older grades. And in my experience, if you haven't been identified for services within special education, there is sometimes a crack in the system in which older students are not administered the kind of diagnostic assessments that may identify persistent underlying needs in phonics and phonemic awareness that are often caught at the younger grades when those kinds of assessments are just part of the screening and assessment plan for all students. And so I would recommend that those of you working with older students take a look at assessment plans and the kinds of assessments available to you and see that they all that you have something to evaluate each of those criteria that was listed on Jan's forms there. Last item, and then I know we're going to need to wrap up, but just wanted to make you aware of 2 assessment options around phonics that are available from Read Naturally. We do offer Dr. Hasbrouck's developed Quick Phonics Screener, which now also comes with a Quick Spelling Screener that's available for both screening and diagnosis of needs around phonics and decoding and word recognition. As well, just in our last update of Read Naturally Encore, we have added a Read Naturally Encore to phonics assessment that is available in the back of our most recent teacher's manual. And the benefit of that assessment, besides the advantage of coming with the program for new purchase and available with an updated teacher's manual, is that it is specifically designed to facilitate placement within the program in terms of the order of the skills that are being assessed, and a very easy correlation from if students are struggling in this section of this assessment, that indicates that proper placement for them would be this level within that particular program in the phonics series. So I hope some of those ideas and recommendations prove helpful. And I want to thank all of you today for leaning into this webinar. I encourage you to access the white paper, the other webinar with Dr. Hasbrouck, which has an in-depth summary of dyslexia and what it is and what those students need, and to share those with colleagues as they are beneficial. And thank you for what you do every day in service to our students and ensuring that they all reach reading proficiency and unlock that potential. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Cory, and thanks to everyone for attending our webinar. Another reminder that we'll be sending out follow-up emails with links to the recording in about 24 hours. So please look for that in your inbox. Feel free to share the recording with anyone at your school or district. Also, if you could, please respond to the survey that will appear on your screen as you exit the webinar today so we can continue to improve this educational experience for all of you in the future. This will be our last webinar for this calendar year. Expect more webinars that should provide you with information about Read Naturally and other informative topics related to reading and reading intervention. Happy New Year to everyone, and thanks again, and have a wonderful day.